All right. So we're going to go to our last part of self protection, asking yourself some honest questions. Okay? The next step here, and I'm giving you this is very valuable information if you really know what I'm doing. If you don't, most of you won't. I've even got a troll now, believe it or not, that thinks that Dante Wilder is like, a great fighter. And I think maybe 5 years ago on a thread, I questioned that in the, respectfully. And so now you'll notice in the comments, my one person who responds, okay, is a troll. I tell you, man, you can't get much worse than that for a channel. Thank you, Ascendium. Thank you for your comments. They're better than nothing. Anyway, with that being said, um, it's not a popularity contest, and the stuff that I'm telling you, if you really listen to it, it's worth a lot more than you think. That's all I'm going to tell you. And that goes on especially for what I'm about to share with you in this final installment. Okay? So, the next thing you have to do is you have to look at an evolving situation hypothetically from both perspectives. Okay? Omote ura, from the perspective of the attacker, the attackers, the person is doing the bodyguarding, okay? And even the person you're bodyguarding, although not so much. You have to figure out what is viable for them in order to understand what to do, okay? And you will find that one of the first things that you do is you train in certain responses reflexively, okay? Because by doing that, by the time you catch up to trying to analyze the situation, you haven't had to spend a lot of time and trying to respond to your attacker. It's instinctive, okay? Things like, for example, this, okay? If somebody's coming up to you, you don't want somebody that close, you create space. But if they suddenly encroach that way, learning how to get into a position where if they try to headbutt you, your head's in the right position, it's protected, and your arm and hand, come out, okay, to form some sort of an attack automatically. Okay, now you've got them in a position where they have to be responsive and you can act. That's the time when you can use a technique. Okay? Okay, you cannot generally use a technique effectively when somebody is being the aggressor, has their balance and full capacity. And if they're going to try to make it so you do not have those qualities, then your response has to be able to neutralize that. And that's what you train reflexively. Usually, when you train these things reflexively, they're big movements, okay? I'm not training to eye poke. I'm not training to back fist. I'm simply training that as soon as something is coming towards me this way, this goes up, okay? So anything in this area is going to get hit, okay? And I can keep doing this. There's nothing sexy about this. It doesn't look particularly like a good martial arts technique, but if you're here, this is going to happen, okay? Until I start to catch up with what's going on, and then I can refine that to be more effective, okay? So you start with whole full body movements that address various situations that could give the attacker an edge, okay? You respond how you deal with diversions by using your senses maximally efficient, okay? I hate to use this as an example because I happen to be a very strong admirer for Malcolm X, but if the famous thing about his assassination, there was some sort of a diversion in the stance, which naturally drew everybody's attention, right? So how do you respond to those diversions? You're guarding somebody, or you're with your family somewhere, and somebody might want to attack you, and you see something going on over there. Use your peripheral vision. Okay? Your peripheral vision senses vision much better and is used to sense vision as opposed to your frontal vision. Okay? And you can keep your focus elsewhere and you can still see what's going on. Want a good example? Why can a catcher throw a runner out when they steal second base? They see that runner. As soon as that runner starts to take off, that catcher knows that runner is about to take off before the ball gets into his mitt. Okay? He wouldn't if he didn't have peripheral vision. The only time he would see the runner is when the runner crossed the plane where his head was located. Okay? Ditto for tactile. Okay? When you're using any sort of a tactile, when somebody's getting close or something, if you keep awareness, relax, and you keep letting them move into a position where you want them to move, okay, you'll be more effective. Sometimes this will even go against certain axioms, but for example, if I want to choke somebody out and they're being very aggressive and pushing into me, instead of trying to push them, grab them, and choke them, okay, just turn them with the shoulder, okay? As they push in, just off balance them a little bit, work behind them, and you have your choke, okay? If somebody's trying to punch you this way, okay, you come under. So this is one of the movements that we train, okay? Why do we train this so much, okay? Because anything that comes this way, if I deflect it, now I can turn you. Okay, I can turn your shoulder, okay, very easily. I can do it with this. It doesn't look as nice, but this, extended, okay, turn, okay? And I'm not giving you anything. That's the thing about this that people don't get is it's not that you're relaxing. It's if you deal with any sort of a grappler or any sort of a person in that situation, they're not even aware of this, but they need your tactile to get a feedback based on what they're going to do next. If you deprive them of that, then they don't have any basis for action. Okay? Very important. Okay? So if I gently deflect you, okay, and then I feel you come this way, and I just sort of pull your shoulder a little more than you want to go, then now, and I just sort of pull you back with me, you don't have your balance, okay? And you had no reason to try to get your balance because you weren't threatened in the first place. These are hard things to train in, but that's what you got to do eventually, okay? When you do start to actually train in fine motor coordinated skills, okay, they're the last part of the chain, okay? And in order to do them properly, everything else has to be set. And I'm going to say that's the same for technique. I actually think the idea of good or bad techniques even is a little bit of a misnomer because technique is the very last point. It is where everything sort of comes together into what it's supposed to be, okay? If you do everything right up until that point, then any technique that you use should have a greater probability of success, okay? But your distance, your timing, your intent, okay, it has to all be right. And it has to work on the premise that before you can even start to catch up and be deliberate in your movements, you have to be able to protect yourself reflexively, okay? Another example of this. A couple of times when my boys were babies, we lived in New York City, and there were these metal steps, and one time it was snowing, and we slipped, and I automatically just went into a roll position with my kid. Okay, I didn't have to try to do that. Okay, if I had to try to do that, it would have been a bad situation. We both would have been hurt. Okay. By contrast, Beans, one of my rescue dogs, I thought that I would try one of those extended leashes. Stupidest thing I ever did. And I'm holding him, and he takes off like a bat out of hell. Now, there's all this slack in the leash. You know how those things work? And I'm just sort of focusing on Beans, come back. And at the last second, I realized what's going to happen. I didn't let go quite in time. I let go. I've caught some of it. But if I had been trained properly reflexively, I would have let that leash go and not had any sort of a situation. As it was, I got banged up a little bit, but I did let go in process. You see the difference, though? Anyway, think of these things a little bit and prepare yourself based on them. Then we can get into a little bit more in depth on the psychological aspects of self-protection. As a matter of fact, we'll do that very last one here. That'll be our last one in the series, since I did promise that. Okay.